Welcome to focus stacking, everyone. So focus stacking is basically a way to get maximum depth of field in your photo. And depth of field is defined as having as much as possible. Well, depth of field is how much of your photo is acceptably in focus. So sometimes you want to have a lot of depth of field, sometimes you want to have very little. And so if you want to have a lot of depth of field, there are times when you physically can't do it. I shoot a lot with a long telephoto lens, 400, 500 millimeters. And if I'm shooting something fairly close, I can't get enough depth of field. If I'm doing something macro, really close up, you just can't get enough depth of field. So what you end up doing is letting the computer do things that your camera can't do for you. And that takes a bit of planning. So when you're photographing something like this field of lupine, you need to shoot multiple photos and they are focused in different areas throughout the photo. So this is one that I had stacked already, but let's start at the beginning. So this photo I focused very close to me. Next photo, a little farther away. Next one, a little farther away, a little farther away, and then clear to the back. And then when I combine all of those, I get everything in focus. Looks like I'm missing one photo from that, but that's okay. So when we're out making photos, we need to think about this. If we realize, look, I'm not getting the depth of field that I want, okay, I need to do some focus stacking. Now, the number one killer is movement. If things are moving in the photo, you're pretty much dead in the water. Trying to focus stack things that are moving really suck. And I'll show you in this photo where some things moved and it really screwed things up. But basically, we need to figure out where, what we want to have in focus close to us. We want to shoot the close focus first, because you might notice as I'm going through these photos, they zoom a little bit. So things get a little bit closer the farther you focus away. So things move, and that's just the physics of lens. So we want to shoot the first one as our close-up, and then trying to figure out how much depth we have in each photo. So these are shot with a 100 to 500 millimeter lens, and it happens to be at f360 or 363 millimeters. I picked 363 on purpose because that's just what looked good. And I'm shooting at f18. And so these are 2.5 second exposures at ISO 100. So you can see even at f18, I'm not getting much depth of field. So I knew right away, if you want that whole field to be in focus, the only way you can do that is focus stacking. So I'm using a tripod. I use a tripod for everything. Do you have to use a tripod? No. It makes it a hell of a lot easier if you do, but Photoshop will help you align the photos if you do shoot them handheld. But I do everything on a tripod, so I don't have to worry about that. So this one I shot and I manually changed my focus. So I was on manual focus and looking through the viewfinder and just shoot one, change my focus a little bit, shoot another, change my focus, shoot another, change my focus. Again, all these were on manual focus. That is the old way to do it. So now many cameras will do this for you, and it depends on your camera. I use a Canon R5, and it has an auto focus bracketing setting, and you can tell it how many photos you want to take. and it will, and you tell it where your first shot is. So you tell it basically, this is where I want to focus on the first one. And then it will automatically blast off a set of photos and change your focus all the way through the shoot. It is way cool. It has changed the way I shoot these. And it really makes a big difference. And so with that auto feature, excuse me, I am now using the touch screen on the back of the camera, and I've set up the touch screen to when I touch it, that's where it'll focus. So I can just touch right on a flower or whatever it is in the foreground. That's where it'll focus. And then when I hit the shutter button, boom, it rips through them all and gives me however many photos it determines I need based on my f-stop and what's in focus. And then I have a set of photos to work with later in the computer. Way cool.
Loren,
Yes.
are you always working in manual?
So no, in that case, you're setting the autofocus on autofocus. So the camera can change the focus. If you're doing it manually, if you wanted to focus here and you're using, I'm sorry, there's two manuals going on here. If you're not using the auto, if you're not using the auto focus bracketing of a camera, and you're manually changing your focus, you can just, using autofocus, just change the focus point to here. In the next photo, you change the focus point to here. In the next photo, you change the focus point to back here, etc., all the way through. That only works if you're using back button focus. If you push down on your shutter button and that changes the focus, this won't work. Well, I guess it would if you changed your focus point every time, but it's much easier with back button focus. So it doesn't, if you're manually focusing and fine tuning, then it won't change it. If you're doing pure autofocus, then yeah, if you move your focus point box in your camera and your viewfinder, you'll get the focus going wherever you need it.
Loren, when
Yes.
you talk about autofocus bracketing, the function, the autofocus bracketing, is that simply bracketing or is that something different?
It is not exposure bracketing, it is focus bracketing.
Focus bracketing. Okay, so that's
Yes.
different.
Yeah, so it's way different than exposure bracketing. So you can think of focus stacking being like HDR for exposure. And it is. It's basically the same thing, except it's not for exposure, it's for focus. And you're using the automation of the computer to overcome the limitations of the camera and the lens.
Or is that a autofocus bracketing? Is that with your manual on your mirrorless camera, or is that also DSLR?
I have not seen a DSLR that does it. There could be, but I don't know them all. Canons don't. I don't know if the Nikon 850-ish does or not. One quick Google search will tell you if your camera does it or not. Or a long look through all the menus in your menu items. Yeah. But it is a very, very cool way to go.
And what focusing mode do you use? Do you use single point or?
Well, it doesn't really matter because some of the focus modes are for things that are moving. So basically, wherever you set up your focus point, that little box in your viewfinder, if you're saying this is where I want to focus, it doesn't matter if it's the matrix or whatever focus types there are. That makes sense? Okay, good.
You're basically, you're setting your aperture and your shutter speed and just using this feature of moving the position of the box, right?
Well, you're best off. You want your exposure to remain the same throughout. It has to, if you change your exposure. So you're better off shooting manual exposure also. Because if I'm shooting this and the sun comes out just a little bit and I don't notice it, and one picture is brighter than the others, it's not going to work. It's going to look like hell. So I'm on manual exposure too. So my exposure remains exactly the same for every shot. So my shutter speed is the same, my aperture is the same, my ISO is the same for every shot. Now I shoot almost everything ISO 100. So, you know, this one's ISO 100, and that's why I have a 2.5 second exposure, because it was overcast. You know, I'm trying to get as much depth of field as I could out of the lens shooting f/18. But I want to be sure that I'm shooting. I don't want to be aperture priority, because if there is a little bit more light in one, or sun's out and it goes behind a cloud, you're toast. You are toast.
Loren, is it a requirement that we need to be at something like f/18 in order for this to work?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It doesn't matter what aperture you use. Let me show you another set of photos here. Let's see what they're at. That one happens to be f/16. Okay, so this is f/5.6. So this was the first one I shot. This is with a 100 millimeter macro. So 4 shots, f/5.6, and they just happen to be 2-second exposures also. But again, exposure time doesn't matter as long as nothing's moving. So that's the second shot, third shot. See how the image is getting smaller as I'm focusing farther away? Isn't that interesting? Yeah. So I recommend shooting a little bit loose, you know, and that's why I want to shoot my first shot focused closest to me, because there's going to be some cropping going on later. So if I focused back there and I wanted to have this in the picture and this in the picture, by the time I got to the front, I'm not going to have that. I'm cropping it out. Okay.
Well, Loren, in this example, you have 4 photos.
Yep.
And each one of them, 75% of the image is out of focus and 25% is in focus. Now, when you consolidate all these or stack them, why isn't the consolidated result one out of focus image?
That's the magic of Photoshop. Photoshop actually goes into your photo and looks for what's in focus and masks off the rest of it and blends it together. Who the hell figured that out? I don't know.
We do this in Lightroom as well?
No, you can't do focus stack in Lightroom. You have to do it in Photoshop. So, you know, you only need to have 2 photos to do it. You know, you have one and back. You know, sometimes I do it with just 2 shots. I think I have a 3-shot one here. So I focused on the leaf in the front. So this one's at f/7.1 with again 100 millimeter lens and 1/2 second, and then focused a little bit farther away. So basically the only thing in focus in this shot's this leaf down here. Then focused a little bit farther away to get the tree itself in focus. So you can see on any one of the 3 shots, I can't get everything in focus. Now, I shot this at f/7.1. I could have been up at f/22 and I would have gotten more depth of field, but not enough. So I said, hell, nothing's moving. It's easy. Let's just shoot 3 and then we'll stick them together later. So you don't have to have a ton of shots. You know, it just depends on how many it takes to get everything in the scene in focus. So when I'm shooting, I stick my finger in front. One finger is where I start my focus stack. So the next shot is my first shot. So I'm focused closest to me. This is a white flower, which was pretty tricky. Second shot, third shot, fourth shot, fifth shot, things farther away. Then after the fifth shot, I'm putting two fingers in front of my lens. That way, when I'm in Lightroom or whatever I'm editing in, I can see right away, oh yeah, you had one finger there, you have two fingers there. In between there is either a focus stack or an HDR, one of the two, right? So I know that all the photos in between my fingers are the ones I want to use for something. If I don't remember what the hell I was doing, I look at them and go, oh yeah, that one's in focus farther away. That one's focused closer. That one's focused closest. Must be a focus stack, right? So when I'm shooting, I try to do that anytime I'm doing a focus stack or an HDR, getting the finger in there so I can figure out what I'm doing. Makes it just easier for back when I'm editing.
So we don't quite get, do you focus manually or automatically when you focus tack? I guess manual.
It doesn't matter.
I think that's where so much of the panic's coming.
I tend to do it manually
You give Donald Trump
because I think it's unless I'm having the camera do the stacking.
in this country for decades.
Okay, somebody needs to
Has to be done. I
mute.
think that's Russians down.
Unless the camera's doing the stacking, it's faster for me to manually just do it. Although I've been trying lately, and this is hard for an old dog to change his ways, is using the focus touchscreen on the back of my camera. And so I can touch where I want in the picture to be in focus. So I can touch the closest thing to me first, and then take my shot, touch the next farthest away thing, take my shot, touch there. Because sometimes my eyes don't let me see as well as they used to. So just using that touch screen to tell the camera where to focus. Basically, I'm changing the focus point by touching the screen rather than looking through the viewfinder and moving a dial to move it around. And that I still fairly frequently don't remember to do that because after shooting for 40 years, that's just not the way I've done it for 40 years. And it's hard to teach the old dog a new trick, but that's a pretty good one that I like, oh yeah, do it that way. You don't even have to look through the camera once you have your composition set.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Can you, with any camera, automatically do photo stacking?
No.
I've got a Nikon Z8. Is there a
Yes.
photo stacking button?
Yes, that has it in the menus. So the Nikon Zs, the Canon R5, the Sony something or others, many of the Sonys do it. Panasonic will actually do the computer work right in the camera for you also. But most of the newer, not low end mirrorless will do it. And it really doesn't have a thing to do with mirrorless, but it's just something that they've been able to program, and whoever figured it out how to do it, and the others stole, copied off of them. So, it's not a mirrorless function. It's just another computer. It's the computing power of the camera is what it really is.
Loren, I just posted the link for the Z8 instruction.
Okay.
Oh,
so in the
thanks.
chat,
Yeah, so, all right.
Lauren, I have a question. It's Carmelina. Is there any way in Lightroom to tell what part of the picture in focus? There used to be a utility that some guy made once, and it would tell you exactly what part of the picture was in focus.
no, I don't. I mean, there may be if somebody made some. I've never seen that, so I don't know of that.
Okay, it was by Jeff Fridl, something like that.
So,
But then it stopped working and I don't think he ever updated it.
yeah, so there were a lot of
What's a
functions
plugin?
that got Adobe didn't like and didn't let you do anymore.
Oh,
Or
there
something.
is no other plugin that will tell you that. No.
Yeah, that I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
If the light changes as you take your various pictures when you focus tack, you would probably adjust some variable to make up for that.
If the light's changing, it's much trickier. So you need to maintain your exposure. But you know, it's hard. It's hard. You know, this is a sunny day in a lavender field in France, and so you know, first shots focus close, and this is with a 400mm lens at f11, and you can see as I go through each shot, I'm just focusing a little bit farther away each time. What's the right amount? I don't know. This was manually done. But the great thing about the cameras that have the auto is it figures it out for you, how many shots. So this one I ended up with what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 shots to get the amount of depth of field that I wanted. Right.
Did I hear you say the Canon 5 R5 will do
Yes.
auto bracket?
Yes.
Do you know if on the Canon R6, if it automatically sets the number of brackets, or do you have to set the number of brackets that you want ahead of time?
So on the Canon, look for the under the focus, autofocus, look for focus bracketing in the menus. And if they have that menu there, then you'll see you can select that and tell it how many shots you think you need, or have it automatically do it.
What is that?
It's gone now.
So I have to tell my camera how many brackets or whatever.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Somebody's got two machines on. Got two computers, or a computer and a iPad or something going. Okay. So any more questions about shooting them?
I was curious, why did you use f11 versus f16 or 18?
I don't know. It was there. So actually it was probably because I wanted to have the maximum sharpness of that lens, which is usually 2 to 3 stops from wide open, and that's an f5.6 lens, so 3 stops is f11. Or it's f4, so it really wouldn't make much difference. F22 can be a little softer in the corners with that lens, so probably because I shot whatever I shot before that at f11, so hell, good enough. For this, it doesn't matter much.
So is the difference between using like f11 versus f18 just the number of shots for the actual stacking process?
Yeah, in theory, yes. Yes, so in theory with f18 you'd have more in focus, so you'd need less shots. But it depends. If you're doing something like something this close, no, it wouldn't make any difference at all. But you know, again, this is with a telephoto lens, so a 400mm lens, you're not going to have as much depth of field as a wider lens.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you use a zoom lens, or does it have to be a designated one?
Yes, yep. All these are with zoom lenses. but you need to make sure you keep your focal length the same. You don't want to shoot one at 130 millimeters and the next one at 140 millimeters. That will mess you up. It won't work. So yeah, you need to make sure you're whatever, like I said, the one of them was 373 millimeters, whatever the hell that is. So, but every shot had to be exactly the same.
How do you
Thank you.
determine how much of your photo is in focus with each shot?
Say that again, Alan.
That was John.
Oh, whoever asked the question, I didn't catch it all.
How do you see how much of your photo is in focus with each shot that you take when you focus stack?
Well, one way is when you're looking through the camera, you're seeing the minimal amount of depth of field. So you can see that I'm focused here, then I focus back, and then you can chimp or look at the picture in your, preview, your review on your back of your camera, and you'll see what's in focus. You can also, most cameras have a depth of field preview button. It's usually hidden on the lower right below the lens. You push that in and it'll show you what's in focus as you're looking through the lens. One nice thing about the mirrorless cameras is that with a DSLR, when you push the depth of field preview button, if you're at f16, it stops the lens down to f16 and your image gets really dark. With a mirrorless, it will adjust for that and let you see it on the screen at the proper exposure. Okay, any other questions on making the pictures in the camera? The next step is doing them in the computer. Okay, let's move to that.
I'm sorry, quick question.
Sure.
Were you saying that it's better to use a zoom lens for these kinds of photos?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
This one's with a 100 millimeter macro lens that's fixed at 100 millimeters. Doesn't matter. So there are basically two programs that most people use for stacking. One is Photoshop, which I'll show you how that works, and the other is Helios. Now I'll show you that real quick, but we're going to do some in Photoshop. The other one is actually a better way, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So in Photoshop, you want to have all your photos in one file as layers. The easiest way to do that is within Lightroom is click on one, hold down your shift, click on the last, select all of them, and then right click and come to edit and open as layers in Photoshop. Edit, open as layers in Photoshop. So I right clicked on any one of the photos, edit in, and open as layers in Photoshop. And we're going to tell it to go ahead and do that. And we'll have a moment to chat while that works on itself. Photoshop will pop up and I'm going to cheat it. And you can see things are happening over here on the right in the layers palette as that churns away a little bit. The more you have, the longer it takes. Okay, so now we can see that we have those 5 photos open as separate layers within Photoshop. So if I turn off a layer, we can see the focus changing as we go through, right? Okay, so now we want to, let me show you the other way to get photos into Photoshop if you don't use Lightroom. So you would have Photoshop open, you would come under File, Automate, Photo Merge. And it doesn't matter if you're Windows or Mac. I'm on a Mac, but they're both the same here. File, Automate, Photo Merge. And it works the easiest if you have all your photos that you are going to stack in one folder. That is just the easiest way to do it. And so you'll get this Photo Merge window. We're going to tell it to use a folder. And I have put some photos in a folder. And so I'm going to click on Browse to find that folder. Oh, that just happens to be right there. Focus stack lavender. So I'm going to click open. And then I want to make sure I uncheck blend images together. We don't want any of these checked. So it's now showing us we're going to use whatever's in that folder. These are the however many 7, 8, 9 photos. And then when we click OK, it will open all those photos in Photoshop and they will be there. They are. Boom. Okay. So this did the exact same thing that Lightroom did. So if you don't use Lightroom, you can do it that way. Okay. And we're at the same place. So it doesn't matter. So again, if I turn them off, we'll see that, oops, my focus point changes throughout. Okay. Okay. I'm going to go back to the other one since it has fewer photos and it will run faster. So I'm going to click on the first image in the layer, hold down my shift, click on the last one. That way I'm selecting all those layers. And now I'm going to tell it to auto align those layers. So under edit, auto align. So this is where if you were hand holding and you moved a little bit, anybody who knows me knows I don't recommend that, but you can do it. Shoot a lot looser if you're hand holding. It will align the layers. And even if you are shooting on a tripod, you need to auto align layers. So I'm going to click that and I'm going to tell it just to use the auto projection. Those are nothing else is checked, just auto projection. Click OK. Wait a minute while it does that. And that will line everything up for us. So if I were to zoom in on our image now, we can see, somewhere we can see a little bit on the bottom there. Something was off just a little bit, right? So there's a little bit of checkerboard behind it. So that's good. It lined it up for us. Now we tell it to stack. So we again go under edit. This time we come down to auto blend layers. Auto blend layers under the edit menu. Okay. Auto blend layers. And click that. And it's going to ask us what blend method we want. We are wanting to stack images. If you're doing a panorama, guess what? You check panorama, right? But we're going to stack images. We are going to check seamless tones and colors. Unless you have big holes in it, don't bother checking content aware, fill transparent areas. Okay, so stack images, seamless tones and colors. And click OK. Now, depending on how many photos you have and how fast your computer is, smoke them if you got them there. And when that is done working, it's going to, boom, magically have one photo that everything is in focus. To me, this is just pure magic, right? So if you remember before, we had one photo that just the front was in focus, one photo the back was in focus, in between. So if you're really into masks, you can see that it created a mask and whatever is showing up in white is what it's using from each of those photos. Whatever's black is not being used. If you're real fussy, you could go in and edit those masks. There are times when you need to, but most of the time you don't, especially if something like this where nothing moved. Now I'm going to zoom in again and show you some problems here. Not problems, but things. So notice, maybe you can, hopefully on the zoom, that from here down is way out of focus. So I'm zoomed in at almost 100%. So there it crunched that. So remember, and on the sides, it's blurry around the edge. See that blur there? So when I said you want to shoot a little bit loose, this is why. So that you can then crop in on that. And if you don't want to crop, you can generate fill and do all kinds of things that you wanted to, but it's easier just to shoot a touch loose and then come in and crop those edges just a little bit there. Okay, now we have a good looking image there. All right.
You see an advantage doing it this way versus Helicon Focus?
Versus what?
Helicon Focus? That's another program that.
Yeah, this is, I'll show you that program in a minute. The Helicon Focus. This is easier. The Helicon might be better. I have found that most of the time this does a very good job. Sometimes it doesn't. So I hop over to that, and I'll show you that program here in a minute. We're not going to go through creating them in it, but I'll show you that.
Okay.
Okay. So these are our images from the field of lavender. I had already stacked them and put them together. So you can see here's the layers with the mass. You can see that around the edge is even more blurry than in the other photo. So I would want to crop that. And there are times as I zoom in where might be a little too much zoom there. If you can see, there's a band right across the middle that's out of focus. I didn't have any image that had that part in focus. I messed up in my manual focusing. So if this was a photo that I really loved, I would have to go in and manually clone or generate more lavender in those bald spots. Sometimes you get just a weird spot. There's one right up there. Let me zoom in on that. Something funky happened there. Who knows what?
So Loren, that was one where you set the focus manually and didn't do the autofocus stacking?
Correct. Actually, I made this picture in 2017. So 7 years ago, I didn't have that ability.
Sharp.
Gil, your audio is really breaking up.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Not much better.
Okay.
Modulated.
Well, I'm not sure, but I'll send the chat.
Okay, yeah. Put it in the chat and I'll see what's what. Okay, so here's our toolbox. Now, when we look at this, we'll notice that this is in focus, this isn't, this is in focus, this isn't. I didn't shoot enough pictures in this one. So there have been times when I've done that on purpose and it creates not something like this, but a landscape. It'll create the foreground in focus, the middle will be out of focus, and the background's out in focus. And it visually is just really spooky. It's like, how the hell does that happen? I don't know if people who aren't photographers would how they react to that. I've never shown it in the gallery, but it can be pretty funky. But here it shows you what happens if you don't get enough in focus. If there's nothing in focus, there's nothing in focus. In theory, you can't do much about it.
Loren, I have a question. Do you think that the content aware would help fix the focus or not?
In that case, I doubt it, because I mean, maybe, I don't know. I don't know. So let me show you one here. Do I have all three? Yeah. So this was a 2-shot focus stack. So that was my first shot. That's my second shot. Here's my stacked one. Now, I'm going to zoom in on this baby. You'll notice how sharp this flower is, right? That's how sharp it really was. And in this case, I saved my ass by using my poor brain. No, come on, guys.
Content aware?
No, I jumped over to, okay, I'm gonna have to,
Topaz.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Topaz Photo AI saved my butt. And I print this one big because I just had it go in and sharpen this flower and this flower, which were really actually out of focus. But when it sharpened those two, it saved my photo. I didn't try on the lug nuts. I don't care enough about that one. I mainly shot that for a demo. But in theory, that could happen. I mean, you could go in and, you know, there's just not much there, and I don't know if generating that would probably do pretty good on the silver part, the gray. I don't know. It's always worth trying. Sometimes you save things you just think you can't. Okay. It's that simple. The trickier part is shooting it. Let's just put together another one real quick here of our 3-shot. So again, I'm selecting all 3 of them. I'm right clicking, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. Jump over to Photoshop and watch it finish. Click on the first layer, hold down my shift, click on the last layer. So I'm selecting all 3. Edit, auto align layers. Auto, nothing else. Okay. Edit, auto blend layers. Seamless tone stack images. Okay. Boom. I have as much depth of field as I want. Now, if I wanted to have the tree in focus back here, I should have shot another picture. In this case, I don't care. But I've got the tree in focus and the leaves.
Loren,
Yes.
would merge layers work the same as AutoBlend or no?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Would merge layers work the same as AutoBlend?
Merge layers, no. No. You got to do it this way. Merge layers will flatten the whole thing. Okay, let me show you the other program real quick. So I'm again selecting these out of Lightroom. I'm just going to go under File and Export. Well, actually, sorry, let me just right click on it. Export to Helicon Focus. And it will wake up Helicon Focus, and you'll see that it slowly. So this is a lot of people swear by this as being a much better focus stacker than Photoshop. It does give you more retouching capabilities, easier. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on render. So it has all our layers here. Those are our source layers. Click on render and it'll do it that fast. Boom, 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 boom. Go, go, go. So it'll show me whatever layer I have selected over here first, and on the right side will be the finished one. You can go in and do some retouching on it. If there are places where it's not masking it the way that you want it to, you can tell it where you want to have this more smoothing or a bigger radius of pixels to choose from, and it's done. So this one I got a pretty clean whack at it. So it's looking pretty good. So there wouldn't be anything else I would need to do other than save it, and it will save it back into Lightroom just like the Photoshop document would. You have some raw file settings. You can mess with the settings, and this one's a bit more complex, so I'm not going to go into much more on it tonight. But if you're doing a lot of focus stacking, it's, I think, worth the investment. It's like $125 for a lifetime. They do have an annual one for, what was it, $30, something like that, if you just want to play with it for a year. And during that year, if you decide you like it, you want to use it the rest of your life, you can upgrade to the lifetime version, and they'll give you full credit for what you've used. If you wait more than a year, you lose the credit for what you invested for the 1 year. But it's pretty cool how you can, take a picture that only one thing's in focus, and now pretty much everything is.
Hey, Lauren, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So is there any way to find my images in Lightroom where, like, maybe months or years ago, I thought someday I would focus stack them, but I never marked them for it. Can Lightroom detect those and find them for me somehow?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
So whenever I do focus stacking or HDR in the keywords, you can see I have focus stacking. So I put focus stacking in my keywords when I import, if I did a focus stack on something, or
Good
HDR,
idea.
so I can find them.
Good idea. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, let me look at the chat and see if I missed any. Somebody uses a program called Franzese, which works well. Okay, cool. There are several free ones out there too. Some of them I've heard okay things, and some of them not so much. So, you get what you pay for, I think. If you're really into masking, as Gil points out there, when I had that one spot on the lavender, wherever that went, that's one place where you get in there and do some masking and fix that. Any other questions?
Lauren, would you do your toning and cropping as the last steps then?
I would do my toning first. So since in theory all our exposures are the same, if I develop this one, let's just say I want it to be that bright for some crazy reason. In Lightroom, it's real easy to, since I have that one selected, hold down my shift bar, click on the last one, click over here on sync, and tell it to synchronize all of that. And then all of those are going to be that, whatever toning I did to it, they're all going to be the same. So while you're in Photoshop, you could go into Camera Raw and adjust things. Sometimes I will do my focus stacking first to make sure it's going to work before I do a lot of toning. I'm not going to spend 15 to 20 minutes toning a photo and then try the focus stacking and it sucked because I shot it wrong. which is, I shot it wrong or something moved, is basically the only two things that can go wrong, and they do frequently. Then I've got to just select, pick one out of the middle maybe, or whatever I want to be in focus, and but yeah. So usually I tone first, then stack. But if you're not sure, you can do a quick stack and then come back and tone it and restack. As you can see, it doesn't take very long to do the stacking. So, 2 minutes to try it and see what happens.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I can Google Helio Focus to find that program.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Gil just pointed out that with Lightroom's masking, if you're doing much masking and removing of, especially if you're doing the generative delete, focus stacking after, could mess some things up. You definitely, if you're going to delete something in one photo, you got to delete it in all of them. So generally, I would probably say, yeah, go ahead and stack it first, and then if you're gonna, if you decided you didn't like this green thing, you wanted to delete it or delete this chunk in the corner, you'd have to do that in every photo first and do it exactly the same, which is tricky. So yeah, if you're doing any major other than just tonal adjustments, I would do the focus stacking first and then come back and do that, because it is saving it. You are saving it as a raw file or a TIFF, or so you can go in and make your raw adjustments.
So it's what you do is you save your photos in folders so that you can find them.
Yeah, so it's easiest if you're not coming out of Lightroom when you're in Photoshop, to open a folder. You can just select the files, but you would have to rename the files. If we come to automate photo merge, if you're using files and you're browsing, you need to know what those file names are. So it's just way easier to plan ahead a little bit, put all those files you're going to stack into one folder. That way you can select folder and tell to browse and find that folder to pull those files in. Do you need to flatten layers before returning to Lightroom? Nope, you don't. Lightroom doesn't let you edit the layers, but if you edit if you wanted to go back into Photoshop and do something that you missed, you'd still have the layers available if you didn't flatten it. So, although flattening does make the file much smaller. So, if you have 10 layers, it makes the file 10 times the size. So there are reasons to do that. So thank you very much, folks.
Ryan,
We'll catch you next time.